He bled through his shirt in silence, and they asked if he was loitering. Not if he was okay. Not what had happened. Just if he had a reason to be there. As if a black man in pain needed permission to exist in a waiting room. How many times must a man serve before someone simply sees him? The lobby lights buzzed low above dull plastic chairs, the kind that curve under weight in years. It was late morning in a county hospital just outside Jackson. Cold outside, colder inside if you paid attention. Leon Rowe eased himself down near the edge of a row, careful not to make noise. His coat was old but clean. A slow patch of blood had begun to bloom near his ribs, but he folded the fabric to keep it hidden. Across the room, a young receptionist typed steadily, eyes locked on her screen. A family came in, 2 kids and a father holding his stomach. They were called within 5 minutes. Leon didn't look up. He simply rested his palm over the dog tag in his pocket, thumb brushing across the scratched metal like it was scripture. His wife, Lucille, sat beside him, fingers wrapped tight around a reusable water bottle she hadn't opened. She leaned over once, whispered, "You sure you're okay?" He nodded. No one asked them anything. No clipboard. No call. No name spoken aloud. Just the subtle hum of waiting, the kind that isn't neutral. The kind that knows your skin before your story. A nurse passed by, glanced once, then twice, then kept walking. Another called out, "Mr. Reynolds," but no one stood. Leon sat still. Bleeding. Upright. Like a man taught to endure. And for now, that's all he did. Somewhere behind the front desk, someone laughed. Somewhere deeper in the building, a monitor beeped. But out here, he waited. And no one asked his name. Not yet. The overhead light flickered once above the intake desk, then steadied like it had made up its mind to stay indifferent. Lucille sat with her back straight, one hand still resting on her husband's knee. Her other hand held his VA card, folded and worn at the corners, just in case someone asked for proof. But no one had. Inside, another name was called, "Mr. Talbot, room 4. A man in a business suit stood up, coughing lightly, no visible injury, and was led past the doors. Lucille looked toward the nurse's desk, then back at Leon. His face hadn't changed. Still still. Still upright. Still bleeding. A nurse walked by, glancing down at the spot near Leon's ribs where the coat had begun to darken. She didn't stop. Instead, she leaned toward another nurse behind the counter and said, just loud enough to be heard, "I think he might be under the influence." Lucille turned her head slightly. "Excuse me?" The nurse blinked. "Ma'am, we're handling active cases right now. You'll need to remain seated." "I didn't ask for a room," Lucille said, her voice steady, almost soft. "I asked for someone to look at my husband." The nurse didn't reply. Just turned and walked away. Leon shifted in his seat. Not from pain, but from a familiar discomfort. Not the kind that comes from the body. The other kind. The kind that builds up in rooms where you are seen, but not acknowledged. Behind the counter, a male nurse opened a bag of pretzels and began to eat. Another answered the phone. A third scrolled through something on a screen. The room wasn't chaotic. It wasn't full. There was time here. There was space. Just no urgency for him. Lucille leaned in closer. "Leon," she whispered. "Say something." He didn't. Instead, he let out a slow breath through his nose, eyes fixed ahead. Not angry. Not surprised. Just waiting. The way a man waits who stood in line before. At different desks. In different uniforms. Where the stakes were higher, but the silence felt the same. No one had touched him. No one had yelled. But something cruel had settled in the air. And just beyond the doors, a monitor beeped in rhythm like a reminder that lives were still being measured. Just, not his. The door near the lobby creaked as the janitor pushed his bucket cart into view. It rolled unevenly, one wheel wobbling like it had a limp. The man paused at the edge of the hallway, looked at the mop handle that kept snagging against the bucket side, and sighed under his breath. Leon rose slowly from his seat. Lucille reached for his arm, but he just nodded once, not to ask, just to reassure. His steps were careful, not because of the pain, but because he didn't want to cause a stir. He walked over, bent down, and gently lifted the mop handle free. Then he steadied the cart and turned it slightly so the man could roll it past the chairs without catching. The janitor blinked. "Thanks, sir." Leon gave a small nod, one hand briefly touching the dog tag in his coat. Then he returned to his seat, slower this time. The room hadn't changed. The people hadn't looked up. But something in the air felt aware. A little girl with braids sat across from them, swinging her legs just above the floor. She watched Leon quietly, eyes drawn to the faded fabric of his coat, the creases pressed into his slacks, the stillness in his posture. Her mother tapped her arm. "Don't stare." Leon caught it. He didn't mind. He smiled gently at the child. Then, almost as an afterthought, he reached into his coat pocket and took out a piece of wrapped hard candy. He held it in his open palm, not saying a word. The girl glanced at her mom. Got a small nod. Then reached over and took it, shyly. Lucille shifted in her chair. "You didn't have to stand up," she said, softly. Leon glanced at the janitor now halfway down the hallway. "He needed help," he answered. Quiet. Even. No pride in it. No lesson to teach. Just a man doing what he's always done. Without noise. Without asking to be seen. A nurse passed again. No clipboard. No call. The only thing moving was the mop bucket, somewhere past the vending machines, leaving behind a faint, wet trail that caught the light under Leon's feet. The lobby had grown quieter, though nothing had improved. The overhead television played a muted weather report, the kind with swirling blue lines and a cheerful forecast for people with somewhere to be. Leon shifted slightly in his seat. The pain in his side had grown sharper, but he stayed upright. His hand tightened for a moment on his coat, where the stain had spread just past the buttons. Still, he didn't say a word. Lucille stood up. She walked slowly to the front desk, careful not to raise her voice. "Ma'am," she said, addressing the nurse behind the counter. "He needs attention. He's bleeding. Been waiting over 30 minutes. The nurse barely looked up. "We're doing the best we can, ma'am. You'll need to stay seated." Lucille's mouth opened, but nothing came out. She glanced toward Leon, still calm, still composed, and walked back. Sat down beside him again. From behind a side door near the hallway, a security guard stepped out. Broad chest, dark shirt tucked too tightly into khaki pants. He scanned the room once, then approached. "Sir," he said, directing his voice at Leon. "We've had a complaint. You're making some folks uncomfortable." Leon didn't move. Lucille turned her head, slowly. Uncomfortable how? The guard glanced toward the desk, then back at them. You're agitated. Staff says you've been muttering, acting unsettled. Leon looked up now, his eyes steady, his voice quiet. I haven't said a word. That's not what we heard, the guard replied. There was no argument. No resistance. Just silence, like the kind you hold in a folded flag or a too long goodbye. Lucille gathered her bag. Leon stood on his own. He nodded once, slowly. We can wait outside. The guard didn't answer, just stepped aside. Lucille offered a small smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. She placed her hand on Leon's back as they walked toward the double doors. The receptionist returned to her keyboard. The janitor was gone. The chair Leon had sat in remained empty, a faint oval of warmth on the plastic. On the floor beneath it, his dog tag had slipped free from his coat. It lay there now, thin chain coiled like a question no one wanted to answer. Outside, the bench was metal, bolted to the concrete. It faced the parking lot, not the sky. The kind of bench meant for waiting, not resting. Leon eased himself down slowly, one hand pressed just beneath his ribs. His breathing was steady, but shallow now. Lucille took off her scarf and folded it into a small square, pressed it gently against his side. He didn't flinch. A thin wind moved through the awning above them, rattling the flags near the ER entrance. The stars and stripes barely lifted. Across the parking lot, someone pushed a shopping cart. Somewhere, a car horn tapped twice and stopped. Lucille looked at her husband's face. You need more than a place to sit, she whispered. Leon shook his head, just once. I'm fine. His voice was softer than usual. Not because of the pain, because he knew she needed to hear it. A few feet away, the automatic doors opened and shut again. A nurse in burgundy scrubs stepped outside. She looked young, mid-20s, with a clipboard pressed to her chest and uncertainty in her eyes. Her badge read S. Daniels. She approached with quiet steps, holding a folded blanket. Ma'am, she said. Sir, I brought this for you. Lucille looked at Leon. He gave the smallest nod. Shelley Daniels unfolded the blanket carefully. It wasn't hospital white. It was pale green with frayed edges, clearly pulled from somewhere and used. She placed it around Leon's shoulders like she was tucking in her own father. I'm sorry, she said. Quiet. Almost to herself. Leon didn't answer. He looked down at his lap, where the dog tag now rested, cold against his slacks. The chain had caught on his coat button, like it didn't want to be forgotten. Nurse Daniels turned to go, hesitated. She bent down and picked something up from under the bench. Did you drop this? Lucille recognized it. A folded piece of paper. Leon's discharge summary from the VA clinic. It must have slipped from his coat earlier. Shelley looked at it. Her brow furrowed. Then her eyes moved from the paper to the name on the dog tag, and she didn't move for a long while. Inside the hospital, the hallway near Trauma Bay 2 stayed quiet. Lights overhead buzzed in their usual way, unbothered, unhurried. Nurse Shelley Daniels stood just outside the ER door, holding the discharge paper in one hand, the weight of a name in the other. She turned slowly, walked back inside, and didn't stop until she reached the central station. Her voice wasn't loud. Dr. Bell, she said. Can I speak with you a second? Dr. Marcus Bell was standing near the vitals board, reading over notes. Mid-50s, tall, shoulders set like a man who'd seen both order and chaos and learned to speak through neither. He looked over his glasses, then at her hands. She passed him the paper first. He took it. Then the dog tag. He didn't speak right away. The chain slid across his palm. The tag turned once, then lay still. His thumb ran over the letters. Leon Rowe. A long pause. Then, where is he? Shelley pointed through the glass. On the bench. Outside. Dr. Bell didn't say another word. He walked. He moved fast, but not with panic. It was something older than that. Familiar. Like responding to a name from a past you'd buried with honor, not forgetfulness. He pushed through the double doors, stepped outside into the wind. Lucille looked up first. Then Leon. Dr. Bell came to a stop 3 feet in front of them. He held the tag out with both hands, as if returning something sacred. Sergeant Leon Rowe, he said. 2nd Battalion. Kandahar. You saved a boy under fire. That boy was me. Leon blinked once. His head tilted just slightly. Dr. Bell turned. Get me a gurney. Now. He didn't shout it. But every word made the wind stop. And for the first time since Leon arrived that morning, someone moved like his life mattered. The hallway cleared as the gurney wheeled through, its rubber wheels humming low against the tile. Dr. Bell walked beside it, one hand resting lightly near Leon's shoulder, steadying more than guiding. Lucille followed, quiet and close. Nurse Shelley Daniels held the doors as they passed, her eyes not meeting anyone else's. Just watching. The ER staff that had ignored him before now parted without a word. Nurse Ellen McCarthy stood stiff near the triage desk, arms folded too tightly, eyes locked on a monitor that wasn't turned on. She didn't speak. Officer Rick Barnes stood just inside the entrance, hands on his belt, unsure whether to nod or step back. He did neither. Dr. Bell didn't address them. His focus stayed on Leon. In the trauma bay, the lights were softer than expected. A monitor beeped slowly in the corner, measuring a rhythm the room had forgotten to care about earlier. Lucille took a seat beside the bed. Her hand found Leon's, fingers worn from years, but steady. Dr. Bell clipped the dog tag gently to the four-pole. It hung there, still swinging slightly from motion. Faded, familiar, undeniable. Another nurse entered the room. Young, male, white. He opened his mouth to ask a question, but Dr. Bell stopped him with a glance. This man's not a chart, he said. He's the reason 3 of us are even standing. The nurse nodded once and stepped back out. No applause. No speeches. Just silence with weight in it. Behind the glass, someone had written Leon's name on the board outside the room. Block letters, nothing fancy. But this time, it was written first. Dr. Bell stood beside the bed for a long while, arms crossed over his chest, then said to no one in particular. He walked in invisible. And we nearly let him leave that way. No one answered. But outside, in the waiting room, the chair Leon had once filled still sat empty. The shape of him lingered in the vinyl curve, and the silence around it finally meant something. The sky had settled into a quiet gold, stretched low across the tops of parked cars. Shadows moved long across the sidewalk, as if everything around him had slowed to match his pace. He walked carefully, cane in one hand now, borrowed from the physical therapy wing. His other hand held Lucille's. Their fingers didn't grip tight. They didn't need to. Behind them, the glass doors slid closed without a sound. Nurse Shelley Daniels stood just inside, watching. She didn't wave. Just placed her hand over her chest, and stayed there a moment longer than needed. Dr. Marcus Bell waited by the flagpole near the curb. In his hands was the dog tag, polished now, chain untangled. He offered it to Leon, but Leon shook his head. "You keep it," he said. "It reminded you." "That's enough." Dr. Bell nodded. He didn't argue. Lucille helped Leon into the passenger seat of their old sedan. The hospital lights glowed behind them, steady and impersonal. As they pulled away, no one applauded. No camera crews. No folded flags. Just a parking lot clearing for the night and a man leaving upright. Inside, the chair Leon once sat in had been wiped down. But not forgotten. Someone had placed a clean clipboard on it, with a single sheet of paper underneath. No name. Just a note scribbled in pen. "Next time, ask him first." There was no signature. In the voiceover, the words come low, like wind just before dusk. He didn't ask for thanks. He never needed headlines. He served a country that didn't always see him. But still, he stood. And sat. And waited. And walked out alive. Then the question, soft but sharp. How many more will we ignore? Before silence becomes a shame we can't explain? If this story stayed with you, subscribe to Black Veteran Stories. Because sometimes, quiet dignity needs to be heard. There's a quiet kind of strength that doesn't shout, doesn't demand. It just shows up, sits down, and waits, with dignity intact. Sergeant Leon Rowe didn't need recognition. He didn't need a medal or a plaque. All he needed was a seat in a waiting room, a fair chance to be seen, like any other man in pain. But it took a name on a dog tag, one that matched another man's memory, for the hospital to finally remember his humanity. In that silence, we're forced to ask, how many others sit like Leon, overlooked not because they're invisible, but because we choose not to look? This story isn't just about a veteran. It's about the systems we've built. It's about the rooms where some are called first, and others are told to wait, no matter how long they've served. So here's a question. What if the next person we ignore is the very one who once stood to protect us? If this story moved you, if it made you pause, please like, share, and subscribe to Black Veteran Stories. Because sometimes, the most powerful voices are the ones that never needed to raise their own.